I wanted to talk about a column I wrote after the Corbin Burnes trade. A column about the Brewers, and you see the headline right there if you're watching, Why the Brewers Had to Trade Corbin Burnes. Now, I wanted to go a little bit deeper about this, wanted to explain my thinking, because judging from some of the comments to the column, you see at the bottom, some people didn't quite follow what I was saying. This is a common affliction in reading comprehension America. And some people, well, they disagree, which is fine. And some people wanted to pick an entirely different fight. Here's the deal. Here's my thinking. So the Brewers non-tendered Brandon Woodruff earlier this offseason. They non-tendered him because they didn't want to pay him $11 million plus while he recovered basically all season from shoulder surgery. Perfectly understandable decision. But what it meant was that they were going to get nothing back for Brandon Woodruff, who was eligible, like Corbin Burnes, for free agency at the end of the season. So nothing for Brandon Woodruff. And my concern with the Brewers was that if they did the same thing with Corbin Burnes, they would get nothing back for him as well, except a draft pick if they made him a qualifying offer, which they almost certainly would do. Now, obviously, they could have taken Corbin Burnes into the season, could have taken another shot with this group, which also includes another big potential free agent, Willy Adames. But there is risk in that, and the risk in that is if Corbin Burnes gets hurt. Frankly, it's the same problem that the White Sox are facing with Dylan Cease. They can take him into the season, and he'll have great value at the deadline. Cease will. But if he gets hurt, that value could be shot. It's a risk. It's not maybe a huge risk, but it's something that is there. Now, the other thing here is if the team is good, if the Brewers are competitive, as they've been for quite some time, you run the risk of another Josh Hader situation if you decide to trade Corbin Burnes at the deadline then, and most likely you're not going to do that. You're not going to risk disrupting the team the way you did with that Hader trade. Now, that trade, people don't realize this, a lot of people don't anyway, really turned out okay for the Brewers. Didn't help that season at all. In fact, it disrupted it and might have crushed it, no doubt. But it ultimately landed the Brewers through another series of maneuvers, William Contreras and Joel Payamps, two guys who are pretty critical, or were pretty critical last year to what they did, and will be pretty critical to what they do going forward. Now, you can argue that the Burnes trade will wreck this season before it even starts. I don't agree. I talked about the players that they got back in the trade who will help them this season. And they've also added Rhys Hoskins. They've got Jackson Chourio making his debut. You don't know how it will go, but it's an exciting thing going on with the team. And they've got a lot of good players. Won the division by 9 games last year. So I don't know that they're necessarily in a horrible place. Still have Freddie Peralta, still have Wade Miley. You have some other prospects coming. You've got some young outfielders that are really exciting. A position club that is still decent at the very least. So within the framework we're dealing with, within the economic structure of this sport, what the Brewers did, in my opinion, yes, it will set them back for 2024. I don't know that there's any question about that. You'd rather have Corbin Burnes on your team than not. But it will also enable them to continue what they've done over the last, 6, 7 years, and that's continue being a sustainable team, a contender year after year. They might not be the team that they were going to be with Burnes this year, but I still expect them to contend in the NL Central. Now, you can say, as some of you did in response to this column and in response to other columns that I've written this offseason, Ken, we need a salary cap. It's time. Certainly, this is a fair discussion. Baseball is the only major professional sport without a salary cap in the United States anyway. And I can understand the discussion. That's a discussion for a separate time, perhaps, but it's not a realistic one for baseball at this particular time. One, CBA, I believe we're in year 2 of a 5-year agreement. And number 2, and more important, the baseball union historically has fought tooth and nail against a salary cap to the point where the league does not even propose it in CBA negotiations. They might propose some things that kind of look like a salary cap. The luxury tax is not a salary cap, but it's a way to drag or slow down salaries at the top of the scale. But they will not propose a pure salary cap. And I don't expect they will do that in the next set of negotiations either. And frankly, I don't know that the sport needs a salary cap. I believe there are other ways to fix the problem, the disparity between the big markets and small markets, without imposing a cap, because you don't want to impose a cap or try to impose a cap because it's going to lead to a work stoppage. You can enhance revenue sharing. You can make more stringent requirements for teams that are receiving revenue sharing to spend money on major league payroll. You can maybe, certainly, increase the number of draft picks that small market teams get. There are all kinds of ways to perhaps restore or make better the competitive imbalance in the sport. Now, continuing this conversation, you can also say, in response to this column, hey, Mark Attanasio, the Brewers owner, he should be spending more money. He should be signing Corbin Burnes and not trading him. Now, I'm never opposed to the idea of an owner spending more money. Frankly, they all should, right? But on what planet does anyone seriously think that the Brewers, smallest media market in Major League Baseball, are going to give Corbin Burnes the kind of contract that Scott Boras is going to seek for him as a free agent? It's probably going to be up around Garrett Cole territory, based on the way Burnes has performed. He might not get what Cole gets, but he's going to want that. Scott Boras will, for Burnes as a free agent. That's not happening. The Brewers are not signing Corbin Burnes. I'm sorry. They're not doing it. So this idea, Attanasio should just spend money and keep Corbin Burnes, sign him to an extension, which Scott Boras never does. No, that's not realistic either. So when I wrote this, I tried to deal with the reality of the Brewers' situation and not what could be if the sport had a salary cap, if Mark Attanasio would spend more money. Those aren't realistic things within the context of what we're talking about. Now, you guys know this, I talk about it all the time. I never mind people disagreeing with me. I never mind civil discussion, civil debate. Hey, this is why we all love baseball. We all love talking about baseball. We all love arguing about baseball. Now, I know Brewers fans didn't like it last summer when I wrote that Craig Counsell might leave. He left. I know Brewers fans didn't like early in the offseason when I wrote precisely that this kind of trade might happen, and it did. Hey, I have no problem with the fans who were ticked off at that time because they didn't want to entertain those concepts, thought those things might not happen. Fair game. All fair game, always. But at the same time, if you're going to call me names, as some of you did, if you're going to call me a bootlicker for the owners, a shill, I would suggest that maybe you read me more frequently. And I would say that maybe you should remember why I'm appearing on fair territory and foul territory in the first place rather than on MLB Network. I don't think it was because I'm a shill for the owners, a bootlicker.